Constitution and the founders. And, it's amazing coming from someone who actually wants to do away with the Republic. She wants to go to a direct vote and get rid of the Electoral College, so she doesn't even believe in a republic. It's the same woman whose constituents in her own district are doing away with George Washington in a mural because he was a slave owner. And so she's not really, she doesn't really say anything about that. The same person who doesn't have any problem with Antifa, who burns our American flags in their protests and demonstrations. So, it is political, it's very partisan, and yet she stands up there and says it's not. It is. Impeachment is a political process. Everyone knows that. I don't think anyone would deny that impeachment is a political process, and that is what this is. And it's certainly been partisan because there hasn't been a single Republican to vote with them. So those are just factually not true statements. And we're going to have a show here, and this is what this is. For the next few weeks, it's going to be a show, and it's for the American people, and it's to try to affect the 2020 elections. That's where we are.
Political, partisan, and a show trial here, then, Michael.
I'm just happy that Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats and the Senate Democrats are dealing with this with the seriousness and the gravity that it deserves. And that's pretty much it. And I think that that's what everyone deserves as we watch this.
Can I ask you, Michael, as well about the timing issue here? Because Nancy Pelosi seemed rather incensed by the accusations that she says this is urgent. She claims that it is. She says, don't talk to me about my timing. I held back for a long time. Frankly, I said this president isn't worth it. But then he gave me no choice. We have heard from her that this is urgent. We heard it again from Jerry Nadler. And yet, as we hear from the White House, she delayed this process for a month.
Yeah, I think what you need to look at is that the Speaker of the House and the Leader of the Senate have a lot of discretion in how they manage their respective chambers.
But you can't claim it's urgent if you sit on it for a month, can you?
Nancy Pelosi's concern is that Mitch McConnell is not going to run a fair trial, essentially, and sweep this under the rug. By delaying it, she was able to put pressure on McConnell. She was able to have a conversation on what a fair trial meant, and now she's moving it forward. But I think she needs to use every lever in her, every bit of power in her control to force that conversation to ensure that there is a fair trial. A trial without witnesses really isn't a trial, right? How can that be seen as a fair process? And that's a conversation that we should have, and the Republicans should face scrutiny for those actions.
How the delay, as we heard from Michael there, was to ensure a fair trial. Given the historic significance of this, that's fair enough. That's part of her duty, isn't it?
Well, I think what she tried to do was overstep her power, and I think she didn't realize that, she doesn't have any power over the Senate, and she's so used to being in power in the House that she thought she could get away with it, and it backfired. I mean, Mitch McConnell just said flat out she's not going to control anything in the Senate and sat on his hands, and so she was forced to do what she's doing now, which is backtrack and pretend like that she actually got something out of it. She didn't get anything out of it except a delay. And as you rightly questioned, if it was so urgent, why would you delay this a month? Possibly it had to do with the Iowa caucus that's coming up. I don't know. But now what you're going to have is several of the presidential candidates are going to be stuck in the Senate, and they're not going to be out in Iowa campaigning because they're going to have to deal with this impeachment hearing. And by the way, it goes on 6 days a week. It's Monday through Saturday, all day, every day. So they won't be able to be out on the campaign trail. So it's going to be interesting to see how it affects this presidential nomination process on the Democrat side.
Michael, given that the Republicans control the Senate, that they don't seem to have been persuaded as yet, what is the purpose of this? Is it just a show trial?
I mean, the purpose of this is to hold Trump accountable, right? The articles of impeachment were very specific and deal with very specific wrongdoing, and there should be a full airing of the facts related to that. I think one point on the process, democracy is messy. We see that in the UK, we see that in the US, right? It takes time, it's confusing at times, and it's just a messy process, and that is not unhealthy, right? We need to have this conversation more broadly, and that's going to take time, and it should take time, right? The Clinton impeachment trial took 5 weeks, and we heard from witnesses, and that was on issues not of international importance or of President Clinton using his authority to try to bully allies. I think that we need to deal with this with the gravity that it deserves.
But given that the outcome seems to be set already, that's my point. What is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of this time when there are other issues, as we discussed?
You know, the House can now take up these other issues, and then they'll be able to send additional legislation over to the Senate after this impeachment trial. I don't think that the issues of state should slow down. But the Senate, I know that they're going to be working 6 days a week. That might be a little new for the Senate. They tend to only work a couple of days a week, so that might be hard. But I'm confident that our elected leaders should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Okay, Michael Zinn, Hal Lambert, thank you both very much indeed for your thoughts this evening.
Thank you.
Michael Zinn and Hal Lambert there debating that as the House of Representatives votes on a resolution that will ultimately, if it passes, kick off the historic trial into President Donald Trump. It is a symbolic day, but a significant one. Let's get more reaction now from our US correspondent, Cordelia Lynch, who is following all of this. And they had a 15-minute window in which to vote, Cordelia.
That's right. They may take that. It could stretch beyond that as well. These types of procedural affairs can stretch on beyond what is expected. The countdown clock suggesting around 3 minutes left now, but we haven't had any indication just yet on whether we're going to get that formal vote to find out whether or not this resolution is passed. The resolution is all about these House managers being appointed, Sarah. They are the people who will be bringing the case to the Senate. Nancy Pelosi appointed them this morning, making them public. She said that she had deliberately chosen litigators because she wants this to be treated as a courtroom. It's quite interesting on this historic moment to just compare what this process has been like compared to the one in most recent history, that of course of Bill Clinton. Now, they are always acrimonious affairs. There is often plenty of partisanship on show, and that's certainly been the case this time round. Capitol Hill as divided, it seems, as the rest of the country. But where there's perhaps even more bad blood this time round is on deciding what the Senate trial will look and feel like. Unlike with Bill Clinton, they haven't been able to reach any kind of consensus on the structure of the Senate trial, and that is because Republicans and the president himself has cast it as an illegitimate sham, a hoax, a political move by Democrats from the start. So even at this moment, when they're looking down the barrel of a very weighty process, they can't decide on what it will look like. Democrats are desperate for new witnesses to be called, including the former National Security Advisor John Bolton and Donald Trump's personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani. They say new evidence has emerged which they believe is deeply incriminating overnight, and House managers will now have the opportunity to present that to Republicans in front of Chief Justice Roberts, the man who will be presiding over this Senate trial. I have to say at this point, though, is whether it will convince any minds, certainly the skeptics, because we've seen people pretty much locked in their lanes. It felt from the start that people either felt that Donald Trump had lent on Ukraine unduly, that he had abused his power, had obstructed Congress, or they thought that Democrats were just trying to unseat Donald Trump from the start, and this is the avenue they've pursued to do that. We're going to be looking going forward at individuals like Senator Mitt Romney, a thorn in the side of the president over the past couple of years. Will he have an open mind? Senators will certainly insist that they remain open-minded. Are they going to be taking into account this new evidence, the allegations that the former US ambassador to Ukraine was subject to surveillance by Rudy Giuliani associates or not? Will they see that that is an illustration of wrongdoing? Is it enough to change their minds? We just don't know at this point, but certainly the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has made clear that he doesn't think there's a need for new witnesses. He doesn't want this to be a show trial. Donald Trump didn't want the trial to go ahead in the first place. He wants this done and dusted, and so he can move on to 2020 and what will be a very fiercely fought election. I have to say, from this vantage point as well, Sarah, when you speak to people outside of this Washington bubble where it's completely consumed by the fate of the president, they're pretty put off by impeachment. Even if they think Donald Trump should be impeached, they don't necessarily think that that is a disqualifying reason that he shouldn't be president after he is impeached. So you're just seeing really play out the kind of division that we have seen from the very start of his presidency.
Cordelia, we're just looking at that vote tally. That 15-minute window, which, as you said, was discretionary and likely to be extended, has now closed, but the vote's still being counted. And as we can see at the moment, going along party lines, so Democrats voting yay, Republicans voting nay. In terms of what happens next, what will we see unfold throughout the evening?
Yeah, just a reminder, by the way, Sarah, they need a simple majority, the Democrats in the House, and I think it's almost certain that they will get that. So it's really just a matter of minutes. This is just procedure. I'm certain that that vote will pass. In terms of later on today, well, the kind of key moment is going to be the handing over of the articles of impeachment to the Secretary of the Senate. Last time we saw it, it was during Bill Clinton's presidency. It will be a long walk through the corridors, multiple cameras trained on those individuals as they hand over a pretty old-fashioned way of doing it. By the way, it's going to be written on paper and handed over in person. In this digital age, they are still going to be using traditional methods in which to do it. We were hoping that we'd be able to listen in to what was being said. At the moment, that's all being negotiated because there's a lot of fallout at the moment between the Senate TV gallery and various producers and correspondents here. There is a suggestion that, in fact, we won't hear the audio, so we won't know what is said. Maybe that's sort of a sign of just how much division and ill will and bad feelings there are between the two parties, a concern that something will be said that shouldn't be. I don't know, your guess is as good as mine on that. But once that is done, we press ahead to tomorrow when the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, can start thrashing out exactly what this Senate trial is going to be. There's lots of unknowns, not a lot of constitutional precedent. Every paper you read, every commentator you speak to is just engaged in a lot of guesswork at the moment. But it is a 2/3 majority that Democrats would need to win over to remove the president. It seems highly unlikely that they'll achieve that at this stage. But Nancy Pelosi certainly talking confident today, saying that she's confident he will be removed, and bolstered perhaps by the new evidence that's been released overnight. We haven't had any official response on those allegations yet. Perhaps we will get them over the next a few hours. But they think they've made their case to the American public, that they understand the gravity of this. Of those I've spoken to voters, though, this issue of foreign policy has perhaps not really resonated with them in the way that other impeachment issues have. Every other impeachment has been about domestic politics. This is about whether Donald Trump pressurized someone, a foreign power, to investigate a rival for his own political gain in an election. Democrats say it's urgent, that the 2020 election could be influenced too. The question is whether voters agree with him. Do they connect with the arguments that they're making. Perhaps the election will be an indicator of whether they've understood this or not. But I think they've still got a lot of people to win over, and throughout Donald Trump's presidency, he's been able to pretty effectively cast this narrative that Washington is completely disconnected with what matters most to voters, that it's it's jobs, it's money on the table, it's healthcare, it's issues like immigration, and not the idea of a foreign power meddling in their democracy. So we'll have to see how this all plays out. Will it be a matter of days or weeks? I think it's going to be a lot shorter than previous ones we've seen. It was in past years, up to 8 weeks long. That doesn't seem like it's going to be the case this time round, but Democrats will certainly be trying to eke out as much time as they possibly can.
Yeah, we'll be watching to see Donald Trump's response to this vote and what happens this evening. But a little earlier, he repeated, didn't he, Cordelia, that claim that this is a con job by the do-nothing Democrats, that this is all a hoax. And we heard from the White House that Nancy Pelosi is just focused on politics instead of the American people.
Yeah, and this is a line that we've seen him repeat from the very beginning, casting Nancy Pelosi as a partisan figure in all this. She was clearly annoyed by that today when she was on the floor just a few moments ago. She was saying, "Don't talk to me about timing." She maintains that she was a very reluctant individual in the whole impeachment process, and she was vocal about that. But it was what she and Democrats alleged that Donald Trump did in his dealings with Ukraine that left her with no choice. So we're seeing really the same arguments just rehashed. Donald Trump and the Trump campaign have been using this impeachment process to raise funds. For them, it's become part of a rallying cry, an applause line, and it's resonated with their voters. The question is, will it politically hurt Democrats? When you saw a debate last night with the Democrat contenders, they all seem pretty frustrated by the question of whether it will hurt them politically or not, because they say this is their constitutional duty, that it's irrelevant about the impact it will have on their chances, that they're duty-bound to do it. And you heard Jerry Nadler as well, who's head of the Judiciary Committee, one of the House managers that Nancy Pelosi has appointed, and a familiar character when it comes to this process. And he was saying that the case is clear-cut, it's black and white, and that Donald Trump has extorted a foreign power. Interesting he should use that word, extorting, because that was not one of the articles of impeachment that was filed. They were very careful, quite narrow and focused. Donald Trump's accused of abuse of power and obstructing a Congress. They can get the votes to do that in the House. They were able to bring on those moderate Democrats who were very reluctant about impeachment before, and it was really a line in the sand for the party. But what will happen in the Senate, we just don't know. Lots of veteran correspondents will tell you here, don't second guess the Senate. They can be surprising. They insist they have not yet made up their minds, so we shouldn't all be speculating on what they may or may not do.
Yeah, Cordelia, as we are speaking, we're seeing those final votes coming in. If you look at the numbers, it would seem that this is going to pass, but we can't say that it has passed. It doesn't formally pass, does it, until the gavel goes down?
Yeah, that's right. And that is because there can be mistakes made or people can change their minds. And in fact, that was the case when we had the impeachment vote back in the House before Christmas. But I think we can't really be in any two minds. We know that this is going to be a vote along party lines. Perhaps there might be one or two surprises. I'm led to believe that's unlikely at this stage.
Yeah, so one Democrat voting nay at this stage, Cordelia. Cordelia, I don't know if you could hear me.
Right,
one
that's
Democrat
interesting.
say no.
That could still change.